a little bit about myself. So as already mentioned, I finished the university here, and I think it was really the basis actually for all my career. So at that time in the 90s, my master's thesis was about neural networks and in medicine, and it was about learning why the neural network learned what it learned. So it was about explainability, that we all know is still a very topical question right now. So it was really far reaching already the ideas that I got from here. So as already mentioned, I went to Munich, where I went to the university, had my PhD, and I worked a long time at the European Patent Office as well. So I was involved in innovation and AI for a long time, and also governance issues around that. And well, now it's already 6 years that I took over the lead of IEEE in Europe. It's in Vienna. And well, as you can see, when it comes to basically the two main things that we're doing in IEEE in Europe, it's public policy and standardization in different fields. AI is one of them. A lot of other fields are like autonomous driving and climate change. When it comes to AI, you can see here, it's really a universal question. That's the Vatican. They were very interested about the AI and the image of the human in the future, and of course, policymakers as well. So let me see if this works. A little bit about IEEE. We are the world's largest technical associations. We have more than 400,000 members. Also a very strong community in Timișoara, in Romania in general. We had our regional meeting in Bucharest this year, earlier. We have Diana Andone here, who is one of the members that I really appreciate. But we're represented basically everywhere. A lot of conferences that you probably heard of, and we are also setting standards like the Wi-Fi standard, for instance, that you're all using now. So it's really also a very technical association which comes from electrical engineering and basically now covers different technologies. So coming back to AI. So we heard from Marius, and I agree with him, that AI is really a fascinating technology to reach what we call superhuman performance. So he already brought some examples. I also brought one which I think, coming from the climate change topic as well, AI helping with nuclear fusion and also achieving unprecedented levels of stability for plasma. So I'm really excited about this possibility that hopefully will maybe solve our problems of the energy problems in the future. So having said that, of course, there are some ethical challenges. One of the examples that maybe is now in the press is about recognizing emotions. Yeah, so it's a lot of AI, basically based on facial recognitions, predicting emotions, and also a lot of other things. We already have first prototypes of transforming brain activity into text, so kind of reading our thoughts as well. So I think that you can imagine that there are some ethical challenges there. So what is happening to this? Is the prediction good? First of all, is it based on scientific evidence? There are also other possibilities. So there was AI systems that tried to predict intelligence based on facial recognitions. And we all know that this was a science that we did not want to pursue. So we don't want to go back into into those eras when this was possible. Coming to ChatGPT. So it's really a technology which reached 100 million users in 2 months. So it's really a record. That shows, of course, that it is a fascinating technology, that it really is of use to the people. But of course, we also know what is called hallucinations, that it is making up facts. And the question is really, What will it do with our society if we will have alternative facts generated at scale, which might be used to manipulation that was also mentioned before? What would it mean for one value which was important until now for us also scientists, namely truthfulness? What can we trust after we are inundated with different alternative facts? And the question of values came up quite early. So this is quite an old one, but you can see already from the beginning, this is basically an analysis of what people saw as the most important values when it come to artificial intelligence. And truthfulness was not at that time a topic, but you can see privacy, accountability, safety and security, transparency, bias, fairness, and responsible governance. So, and you can see that this is basically the same all over the world. So there are different international organizations, industry, governments that came up with that. So it seems that we as society, we would like to have the technology built on certain values. And here are some examples. I mean, in healthcare, when it comes to bias, so everybody agrees we don't want to have bias. And I want to make the point that it is always a matter of context. In medicine, for instance, of course, we don't want a bias in the sense that we have marginalized groups who are not even represented in the data. But of course, we would want to have a positive bias in the sense that the AI should be able to distinguish between, for instance, male and female, because we know that women react differently when it comes, for instance, to a heart attack. So we have to think about bias, but we have to think about the context as well. Another example when it comes to mobility, something that we are also doing in Vienna. So in autonomous driving, we are moving more and more when it comes to testing to scenario-based testing. So it's actually a virtual testing. The question is there, again, what kind of scenarios are you taking and what is a scenario relevant? Of course, you cannot take all the scenarios. Here there is also a lot of ethical questions. Cow in India will have a completely different value than, let's say, here in Timișoara. Again, when it comes to elimination of bias, for instance, the question there was also the discussion on, can we actually train the systems with synthetic data? And there are already a lot of initiatives on generate synthetic data and train the systems based on synthetic data. I think it's also becoming quite clear that it is a question of also social consensus of what we consider as being good quality synthetic data, what kind of representation we would like to have there, and so on. So, and of course, the question is, in general, can we actually, when we're talking about risk, make the safety and security risk, which we are accustomed to, we know how to deal between safety and security, do we actually now always have to take also the ethical risk into account? And this is what is happening now in the governance discussion. It's about redefining risk and moving from just considering safety and security and considering also other risks to human values. And this is basically what the EU AI Act is also built upon. So you see here that in the pyramid, the risk pyramid, there is unacceptable risks for certain applications like social scoring that we don't want to have in the EU. This is the AI Act proposal. And there are other which are considered to be high risk, including those in HR, in medicine and so on, which need to follow certain requirements. And there are other low risk and minimal risk applications where you have different, of course, less requirements. But I would argue that you can see it from the risk perspective, but you can also see it from the measures of success perspective. So actually, if we are training these systems, or if we are building these systems, we can already think from the design to include new measures of success. So including, again, besides the known measures like profit and performance, of course we were trained a lot around performance, to include also other measures of success, which are more related to the planet and the people. And actually that's happening now. It's happening in the EU, it's happening also at the OECD, as you can see, so they are actually put even planet and people in the middle of what should be achieved in the future. The Council of Europe is also working on an AI treaty. So I just want to make the bigger context that it's not only the EU who's working on it. It's part of the Trade and Technology Council between the EU and the US. A lot of other initiatives, as you can see on the international level. Here's just one overview. I'm pretty sure that it's not even actual, probably you have more. You can see that there are a lot of national AI strategies, and in Europe there is the AI Act, but there are also other regulations that are coming up which are relevant for AI. And the Digital Services Act is one, but there are also other Data Act, Data Governance Act, which are going to come as well. So when it comes to governance and when it comes to the intersection between regulation and, let's say, implementation, of course, the regulation cannot be specific enough in order to, to be a regulation that you can use for a long time. So the AI Act is basically building up a set of requirements, high-level requirements, and it leaves it to standards to actually implement them. So as you can see, the requirements will be operationalized by means of technical standards. And for high-risk applications, there is going to be also a conformity assessment requirement. So this is also all in the proposal. It's not definitive yet, but we're talking about what is planned right now. As you can see, for the limited risk, there are also transparency obligations, and even for minimal risk, there are voluntary codes of conduct. So where do we stand now with the AI Act? So as you know, yeah, probably it's a complicated process, but the European Commission came up with a proposal, then it goes to the Council and the Parliament. The Council also comes up with their version of that draft, and what's happening now is that the European Parliament adopted their version, the Liberal Party, and as you can see here, Dragoș Tudorache, who is also Romanian, who is a rapporteur of the AI Act, they finished only last week their version, and they made it even more strict. So there are a lot of, the list of banned practices was extended, biometric identification is now prohibited, both in real time and post-event. So these are proposals from the Parliament. And there are new requirements for high-risk solutions, and there is even a new requirements for the providers of foundation models that need to be vetted by independent experts when it comes to risk management, data governance, and so on. So this is not final. As you can see, there is a plenary vote in June 14th. And if it's going to be accepted, then they go into what is called the trialogue. So where the Commission is negotiating with the Parliament and the Council. And we will see what's coming out of that. Well, when it comes to the operationalization, I said already technical standards are going to play an important role. And with IEEE, we started quite early, 2015, 2016, with the realization that it's important to move away from the technical standards, only technical standards like Wi-Fi, and move towards what we consider socio-technical standards. So those standards were actually involve, ethical consideration, social consideration, or environmental consideration. We also, as was clear until now, these standards can help with the design, but as we know, AI can learn, can change as it is deployed. So we actually need also the certification part of it. And we build it up under different dimensions, which include transparency, algorithmic bias, privacy, accountability, and responsible governance. And it's also important to include the training. You need actually people who can assess the implications of technology and what implications it could have if it is deployed in a certain context. So training is also something that we are building a competency framework when it comes to assessing the implications of technology. And of course, last but not least, the governance is important because the governance inside an organization where is going to define what kind of standards, what kind of skills you need, and what kind of governance structures you are also going to build up. And we have, well, a lot of proof of concept. So one is really with the city of Vienna. They also certified one of their AI services with us. There are different others as well. We can discuss about that later. Here are just some examples of the ethical standards. You can download it for free. It's about, as you see, transparency, data privacy, and so on. So I won't go into that. When it comes again to this development and certification, it's of course a big question. How can you certify something that is constantly changing? And it's going to be actually, it has to be an iteration. So you always have to, and this is also in the AI Act, there is going to be a threshold when you need to recertify certain things. And again, it depends on the risk. You don't have to do it all the time. But you actually have to go back, and after a recertification, you probably have to, there's some changes and so on. So it's a continuous process. Here's just a report from the Joint Research Center of the Commission, European Commission. You can Google it up. It's really about assessing the standards and mapping it, the AI Act, to the existing standards, and well, the recommendations that some of these standards should be used. And last, well, in my last part, I think it's the big question around how can you actually do these certifications when, as we heard, AI is very much dependent on the context scenario. So one way of doing it is that you are starting with some what we call horizontal requirements for transparency, accountability, algorithmic bias, which is independent of context, and you contextualize it for certain application scenarios, like for mobility, for health, and so on. So this is what we adopted for the certification. So, and with this, I would also like to conclude that if we want to make AI work well, then it is humans, I think it was mentioned, it is humans that need to decide how we want to use it. And for that, we need this kind of frameworks where we have consensus. What do we want to achieve in that context? And it's humans who need to decide it. And of course, then the whole governance should be around, if it's a high-risk application, also certification bodies. We need the implications also of civil society. It cannot be that it's only AI experts who are developing AI solutions for people who weren't even us. So we need to include industry, civil society into that as well, and build that ecosystem that is needed also for the value chains in the future.